We don't serve your kind here, the bank manager declares loudly as 82-year-old Frank Sullivan clutches his worn Purple Heart medal through his tattered jacket pocket. The crowded lobby falls silent, watching the homeless veteran being escorted toward the exit while customers whisper and stare. What they don't know is that this frail old man once saved an entire platoon in Vietnam, earning the nation's highest honor for courage under fire. What happens next will leave you speechless and restore your faith in humanity. If stories like Frank's matter to you, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly? Stay with us because this story takes an incredible turn that nobody in that bank saw coming. Frank Sullivan stood at the entrance of First National Bank, his weathered hands shaking slightly as he pushed through the heavy glass doors. At 82, every step was a struggle, but today was different. Today, he had to be here. His clothes were old and patched, his beard gray and unkempt. The smell of the streets clung to him like a shadow. But in his jacket pocket, his fingers found the small velvet box that held his Purple Heart, the only thing of value he had left. The bank was busy. Business people in sharp suits rushed past him. Young mothers held their children closer as he walked by. The security guard watched him with suspicious eyes. Frank approached the teller window, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to open a small account," he said to the young woman behind the glass. "I have some money coming in next." The teller looked him up and down, her nose wrinkling. She called over her supervisor, a thin man with a tight expression. The supervisor took one look at Frank and shook his head. "Sir, this is a respectable establishment," the supervisor said, loud enough for others to hear. "We have standards here." Frank's hands trembled as he reached for his wallet. "I have identification," he said quietly. "I just need a simple checking account." The supervisor's voice grew louder. "We don't serve your kind here. You're making our customers uncomfortable." The words hit Frank like a physical blow. Around him, the bank lobby fell silent. 20, 30. People turned to stare. Some pulled out their phones. Others whispered to each other. A well-dressed woman pulled her daughter away from Frank. "That's disgusting," she muttered. "Why do they let people like that in here?" A businessman in an expensive suit laughed. "Probably hasn't showered in months," he said to his colleague. "Look at those clothes." Frank felt his face burn with shame. He had faced enemy fire in Vietnam. He had crawled through mud and blood to save his fellow soldiers. But standing here, surrounded by judging eyes, he felt smaller than he ever had. The bank manager, a heavy-set man with a red face, came striding over. "What's the problem here?" he demanded. "This man is disturbing our customers," the supervisor explained. "He's asking to open an account, but look at him." The manager looked Frank up and down with disgust. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a place of business, not a homeless shelter." Frank's voice cracked as he spoke. "I serve my country. I fought in Vietnam. I just need a bank account." The manager's face hardened. "A lot of people served. That doesn't give you the right to come in here looking and smelling like that. You're making everyone uncomfortable." The crowd around them grew larger. Someone started recording with their phone. Others whispered harsh words. An elderly woman shook her head in disgust. A young man laughed and pointed. Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. His hand shook as he opened it, revealing the Purple Heart medal inside. The bronze heart with George Washington's profile caught the light. "This is what I got from my service," Frank said, his voice breaking. "I lost 3 fingers and half my hearing saving my unit. I've been living on the streets for 2 years since I lost my apartment." The manager barely glanced at the medal. "Anyone can buy those at a pawn shop," he said coldly. "Security, please escort this man out." The security guard, a large man with cold eyes, stepped forward. "Come on, old man. Time to go." Frank's legs nearly gave out. The shame was overwhelming. 50 years ago, he had been a hero. He had carried wounded men to safety under enemy fire. He had saved lives. Now he was being thrown out like garbage. As the security guard reached for Frank's arm, a voice cut through the crowd. Wait. Everyone turned to see a man in his 50s pushing through the crowd. He wore a simple work shirt and jeans, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. He walked straight to Frank and looked at the Purple Heart in his hands. "Where did you serve?" the man asked quietly. Frank's voice was barely audible. "1st Infantry Division, Vietnam, 1968 to 1970. The man's eyes widened. He looked more closely at the medal, then at Frank's face. "What's your name, soldier?" "Frank Sullivan." "Master Sergeant Frank Sullivan." The man stepped back, his face pale. He turned to the crowd, his voice carrying across the silent lobby. "This man is not just any veteran. This is Master Sergeant Frank Sullivan. He earned this Purple Heart at the Battle of Loc Ninh in 1968. The crowd murmured, but the bank manager rolled his eyes. "How would you know that?" he sneered. The man reached into his wallet and pulled out a card. "Because I'm Colonel David Martinez, retired Army, and I've read about Master Sergeant Sullivan's actions in Vietnam. He single-handedly held off an enemy attack while his unit evacuated wounded soldiers. He saved 17 lives that day." The lobby fell completely silent. Colonel Martinez continued, his voice getting stronger. "This man didn't just serve his country. He bled for it. He sacrificed for it. And now he's being treated like trash in the very country he fought to protect." Frank's eyes filled with tears. Someone remembered. Someone knew. Colonel Martinez turned to the bank manager, his voice cold as steel. "You should be ashamed of yourself. This man is a genuine American hero, and you're throwing him out like garbage." The manager's face turned red. He looked around at the crowd, many of whom were now filming everything. His customers were watching, waiting to see what he would do. A young woman in the crowd spoke up. "My grandfather served in Vietnam. He told me stories about men like this. Real heroes." An older man stepped forward. "I served in Iraq." "This is wrong. This is all wrong." More voices joined in. The tide was turning. The manager found himself surrounded by angry customers, all staring at him with disgust. Colonel Martinez helped Frank to a chair. He knelt down beside him, speaking softly. "What happened, Sergeant? How did you end up on the streets?" Frank's voice was shaky. "Lost my wife to cancer 3 years ago. Used all our savings for her treatment. Lost the house. Lost everything. Been living in shelters and on the streets ever since." The colonel's jaw tightened. He stood up and faced the crowd. "This man gave everything for his country. First in Vietnam, then caring for his dying wife. And this is how we treat him?" The bank manager tried to regain control. "Look, I understand this is emotional, but we have policies. Policies?" Colonel Martinez cut him off. "Your policy is to humiliate war heroes? Your policy is to judge men by their appearance rather than their character?" A reporter who had been in the bank rushed forward. She had heard the commotion and started recording. "Can you tell us what happened here?" she asked Colonel Martinez. The colonel looked directly into the camera. "What happened here is a disgrace. A decorated war hero was humiliated and thrown out of this bank because of how he looks. Master Sergeant Sullivan saved American lives in Vietnam. He deserves our respect, not our judgment." The bank manager realized the situation was spiraling out of control. The last thing he needed was negative publicity. He cleared his throat nervously. "Perhaps we were too hasty," he said. "Maybe we can work something out." But Colonel Martinez wasn't finished. He turned to the crowd. "How many of you have accounts here?" he asked. Many hands went up. And how many of you are disgusted by what you've seen today? Even more hands went up. Then I suggest you close your accounts. Find a bank that treats veterans with respect. Find a bank that judges people by their character, not their appearance. People began nodding. Several customers walked straight to the teller windows, demanding to close their accounts. The manager watched his business crumble before his eyes. Colonel Martinez helped Frank to his feet. "Come on, Sergeant. Let's get you to a bank that deserves your business." As they walked toward the exit, Frank stopped. He turned back to the crowd, his voice stronger now. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for remembering." The crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then building to thunderous applause. Some people were crying. Others stood at attention, saluting the old soldier. Frank Sullivan walked out of that bank with his head held high. For the first time in years, he felt like the hero he had always been. The Purple Heart in his pocket wasn't just a medal anymore. It was a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. And sometimes, when you least expect it, someone remembers your sacrifice. Someone stands up for what's right. Someone reminds the world that heroes come in all forms, even when they're rare. Old and homeless and forgotten, Frank Sullivan had been kicked out of the bank. But he walked away with something more valuable than any account could offer. He walked away with his dignity restored and his service honored. Sometimes that's worth more than all the money in the world.